Parker Jennings hadn't planned on catching a cab that night. He'd planned on being halfway to his penthouse in his private car, but his driver had come down with food poisoning and the backup hadn't shown. So there he was, standing under the dim glow of a flickering street lamp at 1 in the morning, the Manhattan air thick with summer heat and the scent of exhaust. His black suit jacket was slung over his shoulder, and his tie hung loose from a long night of donor meetings and too many fake smiles. The yellow taxi that pulled up next didn't look like much. The body was scratched in places, and one of the rear doors squeaked when he opened it. He slid in anyway, too tired to care. "You headed uptown?" the driver asked, her voice low and a little rough like she hadn't slept in days. Parker glanced up from the back seat, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. She was young, definitely younger than most cab drivers he'd seen. Her brown hair was pulled into a messy bun, strands sticking to her forehead, and her eyes sharp, green, and tired felt like they saw too much. "Yeah, 73rd and Park." She nodded and pulled into traffic. He leaned back, watching the city blur past the windows. It should have been quiet, but there was something unusual about her. The way she drove, calm, focused. Unlike most cabbies, she didn't talk unless spoken to. He respected that, but curiosity got the better of him. "You always drive this late?" he asked. She glanced at him in the mirror. "Only when rent's due." He cracked a small laugh, the first real one he'd had all evening. "Fair enough. What's your name?" "Eden," she said. "Eden Wallace." "Parker." Her eyes flicked back to the mirror. "You don't look like a Parker. What do I look like then?" She shrugged. "Someone who doesn't belong in the back of a cab." That made him smile. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Depends. You one of those Wall Street guys who thinks tipping $20 makes you a hero?" He raised a brow. "I own a company. Investments, real estate, tech startups. And I tip well." She didn't say anything at first, just kept driving. Then, "Must be nice." The silence after that wasn't awkward. It was something else. Charged. Like she just tossed a pebble into a still lake and they both waited for the ripples. 30 minutes later, she pulled up in front of his building, a sleek glass tower with a doorman waiting under glowing lights. Before he could reach for his wallet, she said, "Meter says 32. But you can make it 30. I'm feeling generous." He handed her a $100 bill. "Keep the change." She blinked at the money. "You serious?" "I told you. I tip well." He paused. "And I'd like to see you again." Eden turned around fully now, her brow furrowed. "You mean?" "Like a date." "Yeah," he said simply. "Like a date." She laughed, not mocking but surprised. "You just met me." "I know. But something tells me I'd regret it if I didn't ask." She hesitated. "I don't do pity dates." "This isn't pity." He handed her a business card. "Call me. Or don't. But I hope you do." She looked at the card, then at him. "I'll think about it." He stepped out, the doorman already opening the building door for him. But before he disappeared inside, he turned back and said, "Good night, Eden." She didn't reply, just watched him walk inside. 3 days passed. Parker hadn't heard from her. Not that he'd expected her to call okay, maybe he had. Maybe he'd stared at his phone more than a few times. Maybe he'd even turned down a gala because the idea of smiling at fake people made him nauseous. That Friday night, he found himself back on the street where he'd first met her. No driver. No car. Just him in a suit waiting under the same flickering street lamp. And at exactly 1:15 in the morning, the scratched yellow cab pulled up. Eden's eyes widened when she saw him. "You again," she said, rolling down the window. "I told you I wanted to see you again. I thought that was just some late-night charm." "Nope. Dead serious." She stared at him, then sighed. "You're insane." "Probably." He opened the passenger door and slid in next to her this time. "You're not supposed to sit in front," she said, side-eyeing him. "I'm not a client tonight." "You're not?" "Nope. I'm a guy who wants to take you out for pancakes." She laughed. "Pancakes? There's an all-night diner on 85th. You hungry?" She looked at him, lips twitching. "You know what?" "Yeah, I am." The diner was old school. Vinyl booths, flickering neon lights, and a waiter with a comb-over and a permanent frown. Parker ordered black coffee and banana pancakes. Eden got blueberry waffles and a chocolate milkshake. They talked about everything. Her odd jobs she used to walk dogs for rich people on the Upper East Side. About her mom who passed when she was 17. About how she used to want to be a photographer but couldn't afford the equipment. About how driving gave her time to think. He told her about his company. How being rich didn't make him happy but building things did. How his father never thought he'd make it. How he kept his circle small because most people only saw him as a wallet. Somewhere between the second round of coffee and a shared plate of fries, she looked at him differently. Softer. You're not what I expected, she admitted. What did you expect? Some arrogant guy who thinks he can buy anyone. Well, he said, grinning, I did offer you pancakes. She laughed again, and this time it sounded like relief. At 4 a.m, he walked her back to her cab. She looked up at him, arms crossed. I still don't get why a guy like you is interested in this. In you? He asked. Yeah. He stepped closer, his voice low. Because you're the first real thing I've felt in a long time. She swallowed hard. You barely know me. I want to. She stared at him, and for a second he thought she might bolt. But then she said, Okay. Okay. I'll go out with you. On a real date. But you better not be one of those guys who thinks fancy wine and a rooftop view makes up for being boring. He chuckled. I'll take that as a challenge. Good. And as she got into her cab, she paused, rolled down the window, and said, Night, Parker. He watched her drive away, his chest tighter than it had been in years. Something was happening, and it felt a lot like falling. The sky was still dark when Eden stepped out of her cab the next evening, stretching her arms behind her back. Her shift wouldn't start for another 10 minutes, but she needed the air. The city was quieter at dusk, like it was holding its breath before the chaos of the night began. She hadn't expected to hear from Parker again. Not after pancakes and that look he gave her when she drove off. But he'd called her that morning, his voice low and certain, asking if she had the evening free. She didn't, but she said yes anyway. Now, standing at the corner of Lexington and 52nd, she watched a sleek black car, a Bentley. She guessed pull to the curb. It wasn't flashy, just quietly expensive. The kind of car that didn't have to prove anything. Parker stepped out, dressed in a dark navy overcoat with the collar turned up against the breeze. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. You're early, he said. I didn't want to miss the ride, she replied, brushing her hands on her jeans. He opened the passenger door for her. You ready? She hesitated. Where are we going? You'll see. The ride was quiet at first. Not silent, just comfortable. Eden glanced around the interior of the car, its leather seats and subtle scent of bergamot and cedar. It was the kind of detail she noticed without meaning to. You have a driver tonight, she said eventually. I do, he replied. But I told him to stay quiet. She grinned. Trying to impress me? He looked over at her. No, that would take more than a car. True. They drove for nearly half an hour, crossing the bridge and heading north. The city gave way to quieter streets lined with trees and wrought iron fences. Eventually, the car slowed in front of a building with wide stone steps and ivy climbing up the walls. Parker got out first, then opened her door before she could reach for the handle. Come on, he said. She followed him up the steps and through a pair of antique oak doors. Inside, an older man greeted them with a nod and handed Parker a key without a word. They walked down a hall lined with oil paintings and stepped into an elevator with brass fixtures and a velvet bench inside. What is this place? Eden asked. Private gallery, Parker said. It used to be a residence. Now it's a foundation. For what? He waited until the elevator stopped on the top floor. When the doors opened, they stepped into a room filled with soft lighting and walls lined with black and white photographs. The space was silent except for the hum of climate control and the gentle creak of the hardwood beneath their feet. It's for photographers, he said. This floor's not open to the public. I sponsor exhibitions here. Eden walked slowly through the room, her eyes scanning each image. Some were portraits, some landscapes, but each was striking in its own way, bold, personal, intimate. You did this? She asked, voice quiet. I funded it, he said. The artists did the rest. She turned to face him. Why show me this? Because you told me once you wanted to be behind the camera. I thought you'd want to see what's possible. Eden's throat tightened and she looked away, pretending to study a photo of an old man smoking beside a window. Most people forget what you say, she murmured. Or they pretend to listen. I don't pretend. She stood still for a long moment, then turned back toward him. You ever do this for anyone else? No, he said. Just you. They continued walking through the gallery, side by side, her fingers brushing the edge of a display case that held vintage cameras. Parker stopped by a photograph of a woman standing in a rainstorm, her face tilted to the sky, eyes closed. What do you see when you look at that? He asked. Eden studied it. Peace. Like she's letting everything fall away. He nodded slowly. That's what I saw too. She looked up at him, her voice softer now. You surprise me. That's the plan. When they left the gallery, the air had cooled. The car waited at the curb, but Parker didn't move toward it. Instead, he glanced at a narrow path beside the building, lined with string lights and gravel. Walk with me. Eden nodded, and they started down the path in silence. Eventually, she said, You ever get tired of being careful? He looked at her, confused. What do you mean? You're always composed. Always thinking. You ever just say what you feel? He stopped walking. You want me to say what I feel? She met his eyes. Yeah, I do. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. I feel restless when I'm not around you. I feel like I've been half asleep for years and now suddenly I'm awake. Every time I think about you behind that wheel, I want to pull you out of that cab and tell you you're meant for more than late nights and strangers who barely look at you. Eden didn't speak. Her breath caught somewhere in her chest. Parker looked away. But maybe that's too much. No, she said. It's not. They stood there, barely a foot apart, the night quiet around them. I don't know what this is yet, Eden whispered. But it's real. Yes, he said. It is. She looked up at the sky, then back at him. You ever kiss someone in a garden under string lights? He smiled faintly. No, well, she said, stepping closer, first time for everything. She reached up and he leaned down, their lips meeting in a kiss that was slow and certain, like neither of them was in a rush to break the moment. When they finally pulled apart, Eden rested her forehead against his chest. I'm not easy, she warned. I'm not afraid of complicated, he said. They walked back to the car hand in hand, neither of them speaking because nothing needed to be said. Tonight wasn't about promises or plans. It was about a beginning. A real one. And neither of them was looking back. The glass doors of the Four Seasons ballroom swung open, and Eden froze beneath the arch of its gold-trimmed entrance, her heels clicking softly against the marble as she stepped inside. The space glittered in warm candlelight, chandeliers casting golden halos over the crowd of sharply dressed guests. A jazz quartet played in the corner, and waiters weaved between clusters of people carrying silver trays of champagne and oysters. She'd never seen luxury like this up close. Her dress, a sleek, midnight blue gown with an open back, had been waiting for her at her apartment 2 hours earlier, delivered in a black box with a handwritten note that simply read, Tonight, you belong here. No name, no signature. But she knew who it was from. The fabric hugged her figure like it had been measured to her bones. Parker stood by the balcony doors, his hands in his pockets, talking to a man with silver hair and a face Eden recognized from financial magazines. His charcoal suit was tailored within an inch of its life, but the moment his eyes found hers, the conversation dissolved. He crossed the room without a word, each step measured and intentional, as if the entire event had been orchestrated just so he could watch her walk in. I've never seen you speechless, Eden said when he reached her. I've never seen you look like that, he replied, his voice lower than usual. You're going to ruin me. She lifted her chin. I'm not here to impress anyone. You already have. He offered his arm, and she took it, letting him guide her through the ballroom like it was his second skin. She could feel the stares, the curiosity. Some smiled politely. Others didn't bother hiding their surprise. One woman whispered behind a gloved hand. Eden didn't flinch. You didn't tell me this was a fundraiser, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd come if I did. You're not wrong. They stopped near the gallery of auction items, vintage watches, rare wines, a ski trip to the Alps, each one with a bid sheet beneath it. So why bring me here? She asked. Parker looked straight ahead. Because I wanted you to see where I come from. Not just the money. The expectations. The eyes. This world can swallow people. I wanted you to walk into it on your own terms. Eden tilted her head. And what exactly do you think I am? Someone who doesn't flinch when people stare. She glanced around. I'm flinching. Just very quietly. Parker laughed under his breath. You're doing better than most of the women here. Is that supposed to flatter me? No. Just an observation. A woman in a silk gown with diamond earrings that kissed her collarbones approached them. Her smile was thin, her gaze sliding over Eden like a critique. Parker, she said, her voice smooth. You've been avoiding me. I've been busy, Celeste. Celeste's eyes lingered on Eden. And who's your guest? Eden extended her hand before Parker could speak. I drive a cab. But tonight I'm his date. Celeste blinked, then laughed, clearly unsure whether to be insulted or impressed. Well, that's charming. I thought so, Eden replied, her expression unreadable. Celeste drifted away, and Parker turned to Eden with raised brows. You're dangerous. I'm honest. There's a difference. He guided her toward the balcony, away from the noise. The night air was brisk, but Eden welcomed it. From the terrace, the city spread below them in 1,000 glittering lights. You okay? He asked. She nodded. You know, I thought this would feel like walking into someone else's life. But it doesn't. Why not? Because I don't want to be part of their world. I just want to understand yours. Parker leaned on the railing. It's not all champagne and skyline views. My mother used to say this life looks better from the outside. What happened to her? She left. Couldn't take the pressure of pretending to be something she wasn't. My father stayed. Built an empire. Expected me to do the same. Eden looked at him. And have you? He hesitated. I've built something. But I don't know if it's what I want to be remembered for. She rested her arms on the balcony edge. What do you want, Parker? His fingers brushed hers. I want something real. Not curated. Not bought. Just real. She turned to face him fully. Then why bring me here, to a place where nothing is real? Because I wanted to see if you'd still look at me the same after this. Eden's gaze didn't waver. You think I'm scared of chandeliers and six-figure paintings? I've faced eviction notices and broken nights. You don't intimidate me, Parker. But you do confuse me. He stepped closer. How? Because I don't understand why someone like you who could have anyone, anywhere wants this with me. I don't want anyone. I want the girl who called me out for trying too hard. Who doesn't pretend to care about my last name. Who makes me feel like the rest of this world is just noise. She tilted her head. You're a good talker. I'm a terrible liar. They stood in the quiet for a moment, the sound of the city a distant hum below. Parker finally broke the silence. Come away with me. Just for the weekend. What? No staff. No events. Just us. I'll drive. Eden arched a brow. You drive. Not well. But I'm persistent. She laughed. Where would we go? There's a place in Hudson Valley. Quiet. No reception. A fireplace and terrible coffee. I've never taken anyone. Eden's expression softened, her voice quiet. Why me? Because you're the only person I've met who doesn't want anything from me except the truth. She stared at him for a long beat. Okay, she said. His eyes widened slightly. Really? Yeah. But I get to pick the music. Deal. They stepped back inside the ballroom, but the air had shifted between them lighter somehow, like the walls weren't quite as high as before. Later that night, Eden stood in the back of the lobby as Parker spoke briefly with a colleague. A young man in a suit approached her, holding a flute of champagne. "You came with Jennings?" he asked. "I did." He gave a low whistle. "You're not his usual type." Eden took the champagne and handed it back without drinking. "Maybe that's the point." Then she turned and walked toward Parker, who'd been watching the interaction from across the room. "You ready?" he asked. "More than you know." And as they exited the ballroom together, Eden didn't look back because she wasn't walking away from something. She was heading towards something entirely new. The cabin stood tucked between tall pines and a stretch of river that caught the last of the afternoon light. It wasn't grand, not like the places Eden had imagined Parker retreating to, but that was the point. The charm was in its simplicity: weathered wood, a stone chimney, and a porch swing that creaked when the breeze picked up. She stepped inside first, her boots brushing over the worn floorboards. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something warm, maybe cinnamon. A stack of books leaned against the wall beside a fireplace, and in the corner an old record player spun a slow jazz tune. "You weren't kidding about the coffee," Eden said, lifting a chipped mug from the counter and eyeing the tin of instant grounds. "I said it was terrible." "But we don't have to drink it," Parker replied, setting down the bag of groceries he'd carried in one arm. "I brought wine, and whatever I could panic grab at the last-minute market. Including pasta I have no idea how to cook. Let me guess you've never boiled water." "I'm exceptional at ordering takeout," he said, holding up a jar of sauce like it was a peace offering. Eden rolled up her sleeves. "Step aside, city boy. I've got this." By the time the sun dipped below the trees, the small kitchen was filled with the scent of garlic and tomatoes, and Eden was humming under her breath while stirring a pot. Parker set the table with mismatched plates and poured 2 glasses of wine. "I don't think I've ever seen you this relaxed," she said as they sat down. "That's because I'm usually being asked for something." "You think I'm not?" His eyes met hers across the table. "You haven't once asked me for anything." "That's not entirely true," Eden said. "I asked for control of the playlist on the drive up." "You did," he said. "And you played the same song 4 times. It's a good song." He smiled, then looked down for a beat. "I told my father I wasn't coming to the board meeting Monday." Eden blinked. "Isn't that the one where they're voting on your expansion deal?" "Yes, and I'm skipping it." She leaned back. "Why?" "Because I'm done pretending the next win will finally make me feel something. It's not the business. It's the noise around it. The posturing. The pressure to be someone I'm not sure I ever wanted to be." Eden traced the edge of her wine glass. "So what now?" "I'm going to restructure. Step back from the front-facing role. Build something quieter, smarter. I don't need headlines. I need peace." "You sound sure." "I wasn't. But then I met you." Eden didn't speak right away. She stood, walked to the fireplace, and tugged a blanket from the back of the couch, wrapping it around her shoulders. Parker followed, sitting beside her on the worn cushions, the fire crackling softly between them. "I used to think love was for other people," she said after a while. "People with time, with lives that didn't need patching up every second. I've been surviving so long, I stopped thinking about anything beyond the next month's rent." "You've done more than survive, Eden." She looked at him then, the flames painting gold across her face. "You know why I finally called you that day?" He shook his head. "Because I was tired of being invisible. You saw me, not like a project or a problem, just me. And I didn't know what to do with that." "I still see you," he said. "Even when you try to disappear." She leaned into his shoulder. "I'm not going anywhere." The night deepened, wrapped in quiet. They stayed close, her hand in his, neither one needing to fill the silence. At some point, she fell asleep with her head against him, and he didn't move for a long time, content to just be there. Morning arrived with the sound of birds and a sky streaked in soft pinks. Eden woke to the smell of something burning. "Parker," she called, rushing to the kitchen. "What did you do?" "I thought I'd make pancakes," he said, waving a towel at the smoke curling from the pan. "Turns out I'm a danger to civilization." She burst into laughter. "Step aside, chef." They ate on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the river. Parker handed her a small, flat box. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a photograph, her photograph. The one she'd taken the first time they'd come to this valley. A road curving into the trees, sun breaking through like a promise. "I submitted it," he said. "To the foundation. Under your name." Eden's jaw tightened. "You didn't. It's going to be part of the fall exhibition. You're going to have your own wall." She stared at the image, her voice thick. "Parker, you're not invisible. You never were. You just needed someone to remind you." She looked up at him, eyes shining. "You did more than that." He reached into his coat pocket, pulled something out, then dropped to one knee. Her breath caught. "I was going to wait. I thought I'd planned something extravagant. A rooftop, a spotlight, fireworks, something ridiculous. But then I realized this." He looked around. "This is us. Quiet. Real. I don't need a stage. I just need you." She stared at the ring, simple and elegant, just like everything he'd learned to value. "You're insane," she whispered. "So are you. Say yes anyway." She didn't hesitate. "Yes." He stood and she threw her arms around him. The ring slid onto her finger like it had always been meant for her. "You realize," she said, pulling back just enough to look at him, "you're marrying a woman who still drives a cab." "Not for long," he replied. "Unless you want to." "I don't." "Then what do you want?" She grinned. "You. This. And maybe a camera that isn't from a pawn shop." Done. They kissed, and it wasn't rushed or tentative. It was the kind of kiss that said everything they hadn't needed to say. The kind that promised more. By noon, they were back on the road, but this time it wasn't an escape. It was the beginning. And when Eden slid behind the wheel of his car, her hand in his, the city didn't feel so far anymore. It felt like home. The wedding wasn't in a cathedral or a country club. It wasn't on a rooftop or a private island either. It took place in the garden behind Parker's newly renovated brownstone in the West Village, beneath a canopy of old trees and strings of soft lights that swayed gently in the early evening breeze. Eden stood barefoot on the grass, her gown simple ivory silk that skimmed her figure like a whisper. She wore no veil, no diamonds. Just a delicate wreath of wildflowers in her hair and a camera charm on a silver chain resting at her collarbone. Her bouquet was hand-picked dahlias, marigolds, and sprigs of lavender she'd arranged herself that morning, humming under her breath while Parker made breakfast without setting anything on fire for once. He waited for her at the altar, under a wooden arch wrapped in ivy and linen. No tux, just a deep gray suit with the sleeves rolled up and his heart completely unguarded on his face. When she reached him, her hand slid into his without hesitation. "You're late," he whispered, his thumb tracing a line across her knuckles. "I was busy not tripping over my own excitement," she whispered back. The officiant was a friend of hers, a former passenger from her cab days who'd once paid her double for a ride after she helped him fix his broken glasses. He cried when she asked if he would marry them. There were only 20 guests. No press. No announcements. Just the people who mattered. Her best friend, Clara, who'd taken a red-eye from Chicago. Parker's old college roommate who had once dared him to kiss a stranger in the middle of Central Park. They were both crying before the vows even started. Parker spoke first. "I used to think love had to be planned. That it came after you had everything else figured out. But then you showed up messy, tired, stunning, and you turned all my careful plans into something better. You didn't just change my life, Eden. You gave it color. You gave it weight. You gave it truth." She blinked quickly, refusing to lose the battle with her tears. Then it was her turn. "I never believed in fate. I believed in rent, in long nights, in being invisible. But then you got into my cab and didn't look away. You didn't try to fix me. You just saw me, and you made me believe that maybe the world isn't something to survive. Maybe it's something to live with, someone who won't run when it gets hard." Their rings were plain platinum bands, engraved on the inside with the words they'd said to each other that morning when no one else could hear. "You're more than enough." When the officiant told them to kiss, Parker didn't wait. He pulled Eden into his arms and kissed her like there was no one else in the world. And for those few seconds, there wasn't. The reception was held on the same lawn, under the stars. There was no seating chart, no elaborate speeches. Just music, laughter, and the scent of cinnamon pastries drifting from the dessert table Eden had insisted on baking herself. Parker's father never showed, but his absence didn't leave a hole. Parker had already filled it with something stronger. With choice. With love. With the future he'd built on his own terms. They danced alone at first. No choreographed steps. Just swaying in a circle on the grass, her head on his shoulder, his hand at the small of her back. "Are you happy?" he asked. "I didn't know I could be like this," she answered. "I want to give you everything. You already gave me you. That's enough." They didn't leave for a honeymoon right away. Instead, they spent a week in the brownstone, ignoring calls, cooking together, and sleeping late. Eden's photographs had been featured in the Foundation's fall exhibit, and after the show, she was offered a residency in Florence. She said no. "I don't need to go across the world to find meaning," she told Parker one night while folding laundry. "It's already here, right here." He didn't argue. He just kissed her shoulder and offered her a slice of the apple pie he'd managed not to burn. 6 months passed. Then a year. The brownstone became a home. Eden converted the attic into a light-filled studio, and Parker turned the basement into a listening room with shelves of vinyl and a couch Eden always fell asleep on halfway through the second track. They fought sometimes. About silly things. Who forgot to buy milk? Whether jazz or folk made better dinner music. But they always fought with the intention of coming back together. Always with the goal of understanding, not winning. On their second anniversary, Eden surprised him with a framed photograph, the one she'd taken on their weekend away in the valley. But this time, she'd added a second image beside it. A shot of their hands, wedding rings glinting in the sunlight as they held coffee mugs on the porch. "Two beginnings," she said, "side by side." Parker didn't say anything. He just pulled her onto the couch, wrapped his arms around her, and held her long after the music had stopped. 2 years later, they stood in the nursery of the brownstone, sunlight spilling across the wooden floor. Eden painted tiny stars on the ceiling while Parker assembled a crib with more concentration than he'd ever given a $1 million contract. "She'll have your stubbornness," Parker said, watching her. "She'll have your eyes," Eden replied. "And hopefully neither of our cooking skills." They laughed until they cried. When their daughter was born, Parker held her first, whispering something no one else heard. Eden watched them, her heart so full she thought it might break from the beauty of it. That night, Eden sat in the rocking chair, their daughter asleep against her chest. Parker knelt beside them, resting his head on Eden's knee. "I didn't think I could love you more than I did the day we got married," he said softly. "But seeing you like this, you don't have to say it. I do, because you're still the only real thing in my life. And now I get to spend the rest of it building a quiet, beautiful world with you." Eden brushed a hand through his hair, her voice barely above a whisper. "We already have." And as the city moved outside their window, indifferent and fast, the three of them existed in a stillness that felt like forever. Together, always, fully home.